This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is Milton, Prince, the pastor, Second Temple Baptist Church. I bring you greetings on this wonderful, wonderful day. Let me start with a few housekeeping things, 3 or 4 things. Number one, this is how I look. This is how I look. I got so much flack for not dressing up and for my beard being gray. But all of you who commented on how bad I looked, I want you to, first of all, before you comment, to send me a picture of what you look like 5 weeks into this coronavirus. This is the best I can do. But after hearing all that criticism, I then took an eyelash or eyebrow? Mascara pen and colored my goatee in to appease you. And then one of our great members had made me some chicken, and right after I made the video, I was eating the chicken, and unbeknownst to me, I got all of the mascara in my mouth, and I started tasting steel. I didn't know what it was. I said, oh Lord, I've got the corona. And then it dawned on me that I had ingested all of the mascara. So here I am, live and in living color, gray, with the hat on, the shirt and tie. And if you criticize, send me a picture of what you look like first. All right. With that being said, let's take off the Milton hat and put on the preacher hat. Let's begin this morning with the word of prayer. Father, how we thank you that you are still in control, that there is nothing that happens that is outside of your purview, that is outside of your control. And so we praise you because you're such a great God that we know that you're able to bring good even out of bad. Thank you for how you have protected us and how you have provided for us. Continue to bless us. We'll be careful to give your name the praise, the honor, and the glory. In the name of Jesus the Christ, we pray. The people of God said amen. I want to begin this morning with a song, and then I will get right into the word.
With my hands lifted up and my mouth filled with praise, with a heart of thanksgiving, I will bless thee. Oh,
I will bless thee.
hands lifted up.
Just like in church, I'm doing the wrong words. And my mouth. Bless you. God is great, and he is greatly to be praised. The last time we met physically, I preached from Psalm 27. Psalm 27. David writes, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid?" And in that sermon, we illuminated how David says, since I know that the Lord is my light, and since I know that he is my salvation, since I know that he is the strength of my life, he asks the question of whom shall I be afraid? That I have no reason to be afraid of any person, anything, or any situation. I have no reason to be afraid of anything that will come in my life. And verse 1 sets the groundwork for what David says in the next verses. In verse 1, David testifies about who he knows God to be. And then from verse 2 all the way down to verse 14, he supports this thesis statement of verse 1 and tells us why he has no reason to be afraid. He says in verse 2, he will not be afraid. It is because of his triumphs in God. David in verse 2 says, let me tell you about my triumphs in God. He says, when the wicked, even my enemies and my foes, came upon me to eat up my flesh, let me tell you what they did. They stumbled and they fell. He said, I've had some triumphs in life. I've had some triumphs in life. David had triumphs over a bear. He had triumphs over a lion. He had triumphs over a giant. He had triumphs over the low expectation that his father had about him. David had some triumphs in his life. And likewise, you and I have had some triumphs in our life. And I know that this pandemic is bad. I know that the situation does not look good, but we can not fear because we've had some triumphs in our life. A good homework assignment this coming week might be to go home and write down some of the ways that God has already helped you to triumph in life. David says, I'm not afraid because, number one, of my triumphs in God, but I'm also not afraid, he says, secondly, because of my trust in God. That's essentially what David said in verse 3. He said, though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. The war should rise against me, and this will I be confident. In verse 2, he was talking about what had happened in the past. But in verse 3, he's talking about what might happen in the pending future. He says, I already know what God has already brought me through in the past, but I'm still determined to trust God for what is pending. See, anybody can shout off of the triumphs of the past, but it takes a real believer to say that no matter what happens in the future, I'm still going to trust in the Lord. And David says, even if a whole host shall rise up against me, even if wars shall break out, I'm still going to be confident that the Lord is my light and my salvation, and that he is the strength of my life. He says, so no matter what comes or goes, I'm going to trust God in the midst of it all. That's a good word for somebody who can only trust God on the mountaintop. David said, you need to trust God even when the bottom drops out of your life, even when your world is turned upside down. You need to trust God. David says, I'm not afraid because of my triumphs in God. I'm not afraid because of my trust in God, but I'm also not afraid because of my talks with God. In verses 7 through 12 of Psalm 27, David gives to us a peek into the prayers that he prayed to the Lord. He tells us about his prayer life with the Lord. David then shifts the conversation. After he finishes praying in verses 7 through 12, he begins to talk not to God, but to talk to those of us who are reading Psalm 27. He says, I'm not afraid because of my triumphs in God. I'm not afraid because of my trust in God. I'm not afraid because of my talks with God. But then he shifts in verse